First, the nature of reality and perception. If our perception of the world is inherently subjective and influenced by our senses, memories, and emotions, how can we ever claim to have objective knowledge of reality? Is there a reality independent of our perception, or is reality itself a construct of our minds? A lot to unpack right here. Let me first start with memory, because it is true that even memory is completely subjective, and there is this idea that says that every time you remember something, that memory is altered and diluted. So the next time you remember the memory, it is not only the memory of the event that happened, but also the memory of remembering the memory, and this goes on and on. The answer to the question of how can we claim to have objective knowledge of reality in first instance is that we can't. And it is exactly because our perceptions are subjective that we do not know the real reality. It is also true that reality is purely psychological. Now, we can go to the other extreme and claim that objective reality does in fact exist, such as when you run into a wall, right, and you can't go through it, or if you jump off a cliff or a high building, you will die, etc. This makes me think about this other idea which states that life is all about adjusting the internal to the external, that is, adapting our internal relations, whether biological or psychological, to the external relations, whether they are social or tangible physical objects. We cannot ignore the physical world. It doesn't matter how much we want to do it and simply slip away into the mental realm. Reality is a map. Such as the notion of the map is not the territory. We are constantly guided through a physical world using a map called mind, which approximates the real world for our understanding. In this way, we can navigate through the reality that we do not know or completely comprehend. Second, the ethics of artificial intelligence. As we develop increasingly sophisticated artificial intelligence, at what point, if any, does an AI system merit moral consideration? Should we grant rights to AI entities if they exhibit behaviors akin to human consciousness, and what ethical frameworks should guide our interaction with them? Very good questions. Good questions. First of all, I believe AI is not as developed as we think it is. My personal interaction with AI has been interestingly dull. AI makes your life easier, such as a car for not having to walk, so you get to where you want to go faster and more comfortable. But for me, the ethical considerations should begin when AI starts to truly get creative without having to feed it data. Human consciousness is hard to pinpoint, and it is hard to explain what it is, which is, of course, needed to explain and define if AI were to develop something like it. The best criteria that we can use is to become aware as soon as AI and technology, for that matter, start to truly get creative. If AI were to exhibit truly creative faculties, we should then consider ethical considerations parallel to those of artists and employees alike, such as working hours, pay and/or reward systems, as well as psychological and emotional considerations. This may sound crazy, but we really do not know what makes a human human, or a plant, or an animal. And there is an old notion that says that even inanimate objects are alive. Finally, the ethical framework that should be considered is that of normal human world moral values such as respect, honesty, integrity, and good faith. Third, the problem of personal identity. What constitutes the essence of personal identity over time? If every cell in your body is replaced every 7 years and your thoughts, beliefs, and memories change continuously, what is it that makes you the same person throughout your life? What makes you who you are is the recognition of other people over who you are. That is why you can be different people, because you have different social groups in your life. If you were in this world alone, then you would lack identity. In other words, you wouldn't have an identity. Identity is not who you are or your cells in your body or your ideas, thoughts, beliefs, memories, because as was said, those change with time. And an identity must be somewhat relatively stable throughout time. Your identity, therefore, is defined by what other people think of you, and that is why it is hard to change who you are to other people. Think, for example, when you decide to start a new career, project, you want to move, you start to date a new person, etc. There is instantly resistance from the people that you know. They say that that is not who you are because that is not who you are to them. Identity is ultimately a social construct. So in conclusion, what makes you you is what other people think of you. And likewise, you make other people who they are by constantly and religiously thinking about who they are and telling them this. Fourth, the unconscious mind and free will. To what extent are our decisions and behaviors governed by unconscious processes, and what does this imply about the concept of free will? If much of our behavior is driven by unconscious factors, can we truly be held accountable for our actions, or does this challenge the very notion of personal responsibility? I think it does challenge the notion of personal responsibility because it makes you think that if everything you do so without free will, that is unconsciously, then you shouldn't be held responsible for your actions. And some people, I dare say most people, do live like that. But I also dare challenge the notion and state that I believe that humans are born with a certain level of consciousness or ego, which develops further when you go to school and keeps on developing into adulthood. In adulthood, however, a lot of people stop learning, but it could be further developed to get to know yourself better and more. And this way, you make that which is unconscious, or that which you cannot see in yourself and others, you make that conscious. And once you make it conscious, then you are responsible for the decisions and behaviors that you make, knowing that information. It's the gift, it's the curse of knowledge, right? That is where the term "with great power comes great responsibility" from Uncle Ben in Spider-Man. And that is because the more you know, the more responsible you are for what you are doing, since you know what one action or one decision or one behavior means long-term and extended over many other people and situations. So in short, you are responsible not only of becoming more aware and conscious of yourself and others, but also of the actions you decide to make or not based on your current consciousness.